What an exciting topic today, an exciting conversation for me, especially as someone who hasn't yet written a book, to learn from someone like Tim on the 5 things that he wishes he knew before he began. So listeners, I'm right here with you today. I'm pulling up a chair. I'm ready to learn from Dr. Tim Elmore as we dig into the lessons that he wishes he would have known. So Tim, why don't you kick us off? I'm thrilled for today's conversation.
Yeah, I am too. And actually, it dawned on me, this could be 50 things I wish I knew because there was so much I didn't know. I wrote my first book at 24 years old. And I think I've mentioned that before on this podcast, but that was way before I deserved to be writing any book. But there are 5 big ideas that I thought somebody listening could really benefit from this. So I thought of an analogy, Jared. Have y'all watched a movie or a TV show that maybe is a thriller, maybe a crime detective movie, where that detective is hiding behind a corner and the bad guys are around the other corner, and he pulls out a mirror and he kind of, pulls it out and looks at it, and it allows him to see what's around the corner. What are those guys doing over there? Well, in a sense, that's what I want to do today. I want to hold up a mirror around a corner and let you see around the bend and maybe see ahead, maybe see what others don't see before you jump into this next book project that you've got. So I got 5 ideas. Let me just jump right in. Number 1, I wish I would have known that the actual writing process, writing a book, is just 1/3 of the equation. I think so many times we sat down and we got so excited about the idea of writing a book. We think, man, as soon as this thing's done, woo, the heat will be off. Oh, no. That's a fraction of the journey. So Jared, you and I, we always talk about this, don't we, at the Book in a Weekend experience. Mm-hmm. 1/3 of your experience is actually writing the manuscript. Another third of the experience is creating the actual product. And you're involved in this, Jared, at Maxwell Leadership Publishing. The book layout, the graphic design, how many pages, is it hardback or softback? All those things go into it. And then the third, which some publishers might say is the most important third, is the marketing of the book. Mm-hmm. And writers, I just need to tell you, you're going to be the number 1 salesman of your book. Don't think that once you pass it off to a publisher, your work's done. They will say back to you, oh, no, sir, no, ma'am. Your work has only begun. So I think that everybody who writes a book needs to shed any naivety about the glamour of the process. I often say writing a book is like giving birth to a baby, even though I have never given birth to a baby. You can write that down, listeners. But my wife tells me.
Just for the record.
That's right. Just want you to know I'm not a weird guy. But my wife has told me it's not a glamorous process. The birth of the baby's awesome, but that gestation period, well, this is how writing a book is. So it's worth it, but it's labor. And I would say this, another thing that's good to know, very few writers or authors actually craft a book that generates enough revenue for them to live on. It's possible, but the John Maxwells are very rare. Let's just be honest. Most of you listening know John or know of John. Most people that write a book, you generate a little revenue. You might have several copies. It's still in your garage a year later. But just know a book can lead to revenue. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But very few people can write a book, sit back on that, and watch the cash just pour in from that, that initial book. It's a stimulus or a catalyst for both mission and money. That's why we're for you considering writing a book. One more thing I'll say in light of that cash thing. Jared, you and I have come to know Kerry Oberbrunner. He's a good friend. He does a talk in our Book in a Weekend experience called 18 Streams of Revenue. So the book can be a wonderful tool to generate both the mission that you have inside of you, listeners, but also the margins you want to have, the money you want to make. But I would just say, point number 1, writing your book is just 1/3 of the occasion. Get ready, get prepared. It's just 1/3.
I think it's so helpful, Tim, to remind us of that, even just right at the top of this episode. Yeah. And one thing that we've learned as we've been in this business for decades, learning from John, Tim, and others, the author's the number 1 salesperson of the book. You know, it's not just, you can't rely on other parties to do the work for you. And
Yeah.
so when you get in this business, understand no one is better positioned to sell your book than you are.
Yeah.
And if you go into it with that type of a mindset
Yeah.
and that attitude, it's really going to help.
Yeah.
Really
No
going to
doubt
help you
about it.
along the way.
Yeah. I wish I would have known that right up front. Okay. Number two. Number two is you're going to need to determine whether you're a writer or an author.
Yes.
Now, for
Love
many
this.
people go, well, what's the difference? And I at one time thought that, but our buddy Sangram, who again
Yep.
co-leads this book in a weekend, his first talk he gives is, are you a writer or an author? And here's
Yep.
what he means. If you're a writer, you're the person who actually likes the writing process. You're going to sit down with that laptop or that computer and you're going to hunt and peck and write that manuscript out. An author may not do any writing herself or himself. They are the authorizer. They're the author or the authority of the topic. That, in other words, they got the big idea, but they'll utilize someone else to actually write it. This can be liberating because many of you listening might go, I feel like I'm an author. I got a book inside of me, but I never see myself writing. That's okay. Many people, in fact, John Maxwell himself will say he's got helpers that actually write and so forth and so on. But John's, every one of his books, it's been his big idea that Charlie Wetzel or somebody else puts in print. Just know that the word author is taken from the word authority. So if you are an author, you're perceived by the reader, you're an authority on this topic. Doesn't mean you had to write out every word. You might have someone else wordsmith it. Now, I happen to love both. I know I'm a glutton for punishment, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm working on a book right now, and I love the gathering of the data, looking for stories and quotes and fishing through what's good enough to make it and what's not good enough to make the team, that sort of thing. But most people would say, I cannot labor through that process. And so I'm kind of a weirdo. But just know you're going to have to figure out, am I a writer or an author? Or am I both? The book I'm working on right now, Jared, you and I have talked about it. I'm so excited. It's written for really employers and managers at work to know how to really lead the next generation coming into the workforce, who are often sources of frustration, not fascination for some of these hiring managers. Well, I think we're going to need to onboard them because they're the future. So all of my writing, I'm envisioning this person. In fact, I wish I could turn my camera around. I'm looking at my target reader and my book's promise. I'm going to read it to you real quick.
Yeah.
I see it every day that I sit down and write. My target reader is a hiring manager over 45 years old who's not had a promising experience with freshly graduated team members, but who needs them to contribute to the mission. So I want to write to a frustrated person who's saying, I'm about to give up, buddy. So that's my writer or my reader. Now, my book's promise is this: I will equip the reader to bring out the best in Gen Z teammates at work. They will understand, connect with, and lead their young employees well when they go through this resource. Now, that keeps me clear, but that helps me actually write. I am an author, hopefully. I've authored some books, but this is going to help me be both an author and a writer. So I'll stop there.
I think that's so good. Are you an author or are you a writer? Neither one are wrong.
Yeah.
Neither one are bad. It's not, one is not less than the other, but understanding who you are early is going to help you identify the team that you need to have around you.
Yeah.
When you get later in the stages of the book writing process, there's developmental editors or substantive editors that come alongside you. There's copy editors and proofreaders, and there is editorial support that's coming. You don't have to be the whole package, but understanding where you lean. So very few people are the whole package. And I will say Dr. Tim Elmore is the whole package. He's a glutton for punishment. He's also a visionary and an author. He can do all the things, but he still has a team around him. Yeah. Tim, you still have a team around you that's helping you get it across the finish line. And so understanding who you are is going to put you in a better position to understand who you need to have around you as a writing team to make the best product at the end of the day.
That's a great statement. Who you are determines who you need around you. And you're right. There's ghostwriters. Many people will use a ghostwriter. Don Yeager, writes for others, and he's brilliant. So just know, like Jared just said, you don't need to feel like a inferior individual if you got to utilize somebody else to actually do the writing. Okay,
Let me
that's
just,
number 2.
Tim, one quick thing also,
Yeah.
if there's listeners out there that are in need of help in the ghostwriting department, reach out to us. I was just on the phone yesterday with an organization that helps match ghostwriters with authors that aren't able to do the work themselves or don't have the time or the gifting. And so Tim, you have relationships. We have relationships with people that can help you. Reach out to us and we'll get you connected.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, Jared. All right. Number 3, books sell events and events sell books. So I first heard this statement decades ago from my friend Tim Irwin, who's written a number of incredible books. But Tim put it this way: books sell speeches and speeches sell books. Now you can imagine, listeners, what he means by this. If you have written a book, you've got a calling card now, and more than a calling card. But that book might be given to someone by you, and they read it and they go, oh my gosh, I want you to speak at my next workshop or conference. So books sell speeches, but also you might be giving a talk at a conference and they go, oh my gosh, this has been great. I want more. You go, good. Back of the room, pick up a copy of my latest book, blah, 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 blah. And there's back of room sales. So again, there's that revenue thing. But just know they work hand in hand. It's like a dance. Books and speeches, speeches and books. They both move the other. And if you're building out a business, just know a book could be very, very helpful. If you're a Maxwell coach or team member, this could be very, very helpful for you to actually build that business out. One thing I want to share with you, John Maxwell taught us years and years ago in his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, about the law process. I want to remind you of the law process. Basically, this law teaches us that leadership development is more than an event. It is an ongoing journey of learning experiences. So isn't it true? We live in America and we are in mad love with events. There's a conference every week of the year. You could go to conferences every day of the year. You read the right magazines, they're promoting another workshop, event, retreat, you name it. Not against them. But I think we put way too much stock in the event and not enough stock in the process. And that's where your book comes in.
Very good.
So the event is kind of like the wedding. Woo, nice event. Love that wedding. The marriage is the process, right? Sure. Not real glitzy. Honeymoon gets over after a couple of weeks, baby. But isn't the marriage the real nitty gritty of your life? It is. The birth of a baby is an event. Balloons, cigars, family all around you. They leave and you got to raise that baby. That's the parenting process. And Jared, you know that. You got young kids right now. Not real glitzy every day. In fact, there's stuff laying around the house because there's kids today.
Move on. I can't handle it. Move on.
All right. So here's the law process, listeners. I know you know this, but I just need to say it. You need both. Events are really good. Most Americans, anyway, need to go to an event to have an epiphany or a light bulb go on and go, oh my gosh, I should do that more, or I should learn to lead, or I should learn to build better habits in my life.
Yep.
However, we leave that conference, we got goosebumps. It's been so inspiring. And that conference notebook goes on the shelf and it stays there. Yep. So keep in mind, the event motivates, but the process matures. The event encourages decisions, but the process encourages development. The event is a calendar issue. You got to write down April 23rd, go to this event. The process is a consistency issue. And by the way, that's why we don't do the process very well. We're not real consistent in our lives. The event is usually about a big group. I mean, we just enjoyed IMC. Here's a couple thousand, more than a couple thousand people at this huge event. Think this through. The process is usually about a small group where you're in a smaller community discussing and applying what we learned at that big event. And then one more thought. The event becomes a catalyst for growth, but the process, it actually builds a culture, the culture that you want to have at your workplace. So I'll stop there, but just know your book is a needed tool and it can be the subject of an event, but I would say use your book, sell afterwards or sell before the event goes, and let that guide the process of learning for those people you're trying to change their life.
So helpful, Tim. Focusing on the process is Very, very important. We could stay here for 10 more minutes, but I want to get to point number 4 and make sure we get to all the take us there. Take us to the next step at point number 4.
Yeah. I'm going to use a term now, listeners, that you may or may not have heard, but stay with me. A book can serve best as a step function. No, a step function is very important to understand. Otherwise, the words you write down or the words you say on a stage are going to be short-lived. So have you ever noticed when you do host an event, like I just said, very often it's a very relevant topic, but it just becomes a memory in our memory banks at best. It heightens people's focus on a topic, which is good, but then in the aftermath, the excitement is over, the honeymoon is over, like I just said, and now, darn it, there's this marriage I got to tend to. So here's what a step function does. I'm going to visually diagram this. So listeners, if you're not watching this, you're going to have to imagine. Usually our growth in our organizations is fairly flat, maybe rising a little bit, but pretty flat, slowly rising. An event can jack it up high. Events usually spike morale, excitement, goosebumps, let's go, motivation, okay? After the event, the spike goes down, but if you handle it right, it will go down at a higher level than where you were before the event. That's a step function. So you're down here, you spike way up high, you do return to reality after the ball is over, Cinderella, but you come back better than you were. Wow. And that's what your book can do. If your book is handled well, it isn't just, ooh, I got famous, I wrote a book. This is a tool in their hand. And you actually spend time talking about the step function. Here's what I have found in my 45 years of my career. If we are planning an event, Jared, we'll spend 90% of our time planning the event and 10% on follow-up. It maybe ought to be the other way around. I'm just saying, you need to have a good event. IMC is always a good event. Let's face it, it is. And it takes work. But I think it's even more work to really plan out that not so glitzy week by week discussion that small group on the marketing team needs to have about this concept for 8, 10, 12 weeks, which is one chapter a week, perhaps, in a discussion. That's where we apply what we learned at the event. So think about step functions and think about your book as a tool for that step function.
What a great visual in understanding that there is going to be a drop-off after this high. We need to understand the reality, but managing that drop-off in a step, instead of a avalanche or a rock, a slide down the hill. No, the follow-up, the process that we have in place after the event, the people that we surround ourselves with after that event, that is so crucial to think through and understanding the way that we naturally are wired. Yeah. Wow. What a great concept, Tim.
It is a good one. And it's been so helpful for us at Growing Leaders. One quick analogy, since I've been talking about marriage and weddings and everything else. My wife, Pam, and I went to a really cool workshop on marriage. We had a good marriage, but we wanted it to be great. After that workshop, we did come down. It was a high. It was definitely a high. We came down, but they gave us a workbook that we continued to talk about and process, just like we're talking about now. I feel like our marriage is better, even though it's not goosebumps and honeymoons every day. It's better than it was. So this is a step function. We need to use it. Okay. The fifth and final big idea on this conversation is, I have to chuckle when I say this, get ready to go back to school and outline. Now, Jared, I'm going to put you on the spot. When was the last time was it probably in college or something that you wrote an outline, or have you outlined since college?
Rigorously, yes. I mean, I've been, I've done some, but mine are pretty loose. I got to be honest. Mine are pretty loose.
Well, if I were honest, me too. Folks, here's what I'm saying. I know a few authors that don't outline. I think Andy Stanley's one of them. He's brilliant, but he's rare. Most of the time, and by the way, you talk to Don Yeager, you talk to Valerie Burton, these people say the outline is the magic. That's where the magic is. Yeah. And Don would even tell you he spends months outlining the chapter, which then means the writing is relatively simple because you did the work, making sure this is the step-by-step journey of this chapter. So very few good books on the market just surface without being outlined first. I'm actually doing this right now with this book I mentioned. So I'm outlining chapter 2. and it's laborious. I keep flip-flopping things. That story should go there. No, maybe there. Oh, I need that quote right there. So don't be afraid, listeners, to spend a ridiculous amount of time outlining. It's kind of like the private discipline that will show up in public. Can I say that again?
Wow.
It's kind of like the private discipline you do that will show up in public in a brilliant book. And they'll go, how'd you do that? Well, it was labor pains, buddy. That's what you're going to say back in return. So let me say one last quick thing, and I know we need to wrap up. When I write a blog, and I write regularly, every week, I'm writing a blog. I'm writing an article for Inc. magazine, Psychology Today, my LinkedIn page, Growing Leaders. Sometimes there's a Maxwell blog that I've done. Here's the formula that I outline for blogs that might even be helpful for a chapter in your book, listeners. Give your reader a story, give them a stat, and give them a step. I'll say that again. Give them a story, give them a stat, give them a step. So have you ever noticed a really good book often starts with a really good story that draws you in? You're going, oh my gosh, this is going to be so fun to read this chapter. I love the story of XYZ. But after you leave the story, which is a microcosm of what you want to talk about, it's a story of me or a person. Now you need to go to some data where you take it from me to we. Okay, now we're talking about, 75% of America wrestles with this issue. And the reader's going, oh, wow, yeah. So there's supporting material after that opening story. Then you need to make sure you give them a step to take before that chapter's over. Don't just leave them with great intellectual gymnastics. Say, here's 2 steps you can take. So I'm outlining chapter. Well, let me tell you what I did in chapter 1. Chapter 1 of my new book, I tell the story of Colin. Colin is a graduate of MIT that was hired by GM. And I won't give it away. It's a great story about this sharp young guy that left this brilliant workplace because they didn't have a place for him as an entrepreneur. Then I go to some supporting material. I have some data on here's where Gen Z is, here's why they're leaving jobs, here's why they're quietly quitting, that sort of thing. And then I give 2 steps at the end of that chapter. I say, employers, we're going to have to coach a little bit more than we used to. We're going to have to listen a little bit more than we used to. Now it's better than that, but can you see how there's a heart part, there's a head part, and there's a hand? So I'll stop there, Jared, but those are my 5 big concepts I wish I would have known, and I'm hoping this gives you a head start, listeners, as you write yourself.
You know what's really interesting to me, Tim, just going back and going back through the 5 here. Number 1, writing your book is just 1/3 of the equation. A third is marketing the book. A third is creating the product of the book.
Yep.
Number 2, you must determine whether you're a writer or an author. Number 3, books sell events and events sell books. Number 4, a book serves as a step function, that next step from the high that helps people build their process. And number 5, get ready to go back to school and outline. There's really only 1 or 2 of these that are explicitly about your writing process, which I think is fascinating. The things surrounding the book are the things that you said, hey, I wish I would have, nobody told me that. You know, I maybe I was more equipped for some other things, but nobody told me about these other elements. I think that's fascinating.
It really is. So going back to my opening analogy about the detective with a mirror looking around the corner, listeners, this may be syrupy or cliche, but if you think about it, that detective that's looking in the mirror and now he can see around the corner, it always helps him get his man. It always helps him get the bad guy. Yeah. So may this list be your mirror to help you get your job done, get your mission accomplished, and get that book out there.
Good. That's why we're here. We want to help you get your message out to the world, maximize it. We believe that you have a book inside of you and we want to help you get that out, because we also believe that the world needs the book in you. Until next time, Tim, thanks so much. And we'll see you all back here shortly.